Welcome to the latest episode of the Motorvait Supplier Showcase. I'm Neil Smith, CEO of Motorvait Automotive Consultancy, and in this series, I'm sitting down with the innovators behind the UK's most exciting automotive businesses, whether they're game-changing startups, industry disruptors, or established legends. We'll be diving into the latest digital and physical products currently shaking up the UK vehicle retail space. If it's making waves, we'll be covering it. My guest today is Oliver Phillpott, founder of Generational, a business that provides OEM-grade electric vehicle battery health checks and state of health certification services to car dealers, as well as EV battery monitoring solutions to business customers and EV owners. Welcome, Oliver, and thanks for being my guest on this, the latest episode of the Supplier Showcase podcast.
Thanks, Neil. Pleasure. Really appreciate the invitation.
Brilliant. Now, we met at AM Live last year, and I've been following Generational's journey since then. To enable us to get to know you a little better, a regular feature of this podcast series is the guest icebreaker. So, please tell us 3 interesting facts about yourself, 2 of which are true and 1 that isn't. We'll then let the viewers ponder this during the podcast and ask you to reveal which are true and which is false at the end.
Cool. So, fact number 1. I failed my driving theory test, not once, not twice, but 3 times. I was an undergraduate at Cambridge University at the time, so I think I had a pretty high opinion of myself, very much wrongly. I think it shows you that despite being, good at exams, it really doesn't help you spot virtual cyclists or virtual sheep on a hazard perception video. So. Yeah. That's number 1. Number 2, my first car was a first generation Renault Clio, and We Buy Any Car wouldn't buy it when I wanted to get rid of it. Actually, it's a funny one. That one, talk about range anxiety on EVs. That car, the petrol gauge was like just completely non-functional. So every time you filled it up, you had to reset the mileometer. And then you're just doing maths in your head the whole time. So you really needed nerves of steel for that thing. And then number 3, one of my less known passions is cryptocurrency trading. I literally am that guy at dinner parties who evangelizes about decentralized finance. And I've actually even got Bitcoin pajamas, which my wife hates.
Brilliant. Okay. So, clearly we'll let the audience dwell on that, but if the We Buy Any Car one's right, then clearly they don't buy any car, do they? So
yeah,
a bit of a trades description.
They had all the paperwork and everything. So
excellent. Okay, so look, we'll get to that at the end, and we'll find out which of those facts was fake. So look, let's learn a little bit more about Oliver Phillpott. Tell me about you, your background, and how you ended up where you are today.
Sure. I guess going back to the beginning, so I started out life in the world of leasing software, so building the core systems for automotive finance companies. Right. So the company I worked for provided like the heart and lungs, really, to companies like MBFS, so Mercedes-Benz Financial Services, Toyota Financial Services, big automotive captives and private like that. And I started out right at the bottom. I was like fixing bugs, doing code releases after hours, all that sort of stuff. And I think it taught me like what good software really looks like from the ground up. And I gradually, moved up the ranks. And one of the biggest projects I worked on was launching a new finance business in Germany with Santander and Hyundai Capital. That was really great project, super exciting. And I think it helped me build that understanding of the whole automotive value chain through, dealer finance, like all getting the cars and all the, the finance that underpins it. And a deep understanding of all the assets as well. So, that was a really exciting time. Eventually the company I worked for went public, did an IPO. It was one of the biggest fintech IPOs in the UK at the time. And that was quite an experience. Really enjoyed my time, but I think I got to a stage where I wanted to, I'd done a lot of building software, and I wanted to sort of, go and roll up my sleeves and build a business, really. So I left, I decided to go to business school. I moved to France for a year, and then moved into the world of startups, basically, where I stayed for a few years and worked in different roles, senior roles in very high growth startups in the UK. And one of which I was basically placed in charge of this electric fleet. It was a grocery delivery business, and my job was really like helping to manage the operations of the whole thing. And we were one of the first like fully electric delivery fleets in the UK, and we had pretty early generation like mopeds and e-bikes and stuff like that. And battery issues were something that like we came up against with these early generation vehicles, right? And I actually witnessed 2 battery fires, which is a pretty scary thing to see because they're very hard to put out.
Yeah.
Thankfully, everyone was fine, and one of them wasn't our company, but it was just opposite us in one of our warehouses. So I think this issue, that's sort of really where I started to become aware of the fact that like there is no easy way for businesses and people to understand whether batteries were any good or not. So especially as like, more electric vehicles becoming mainstream, and I had this sort of prior understanding of residual values and like the importance that like all of that played in the used market, played in the new market, and the transition. So that was really, I guess, the sort of how I came to start thinking about the seeds for the idea of the business.
Yeah. Okay. And look, I think it's interesting you worked in that sort of delivery sector. I'm doing some consultancy with an LCV provider now.
Yeah.
And the product they're selling new is a Renault Trucks van. And the amount of time taken now into looking at those delivery routes and topography and the routes they're taking in terms of length of the journey, and the amount of time and effort that goes into looking at a fleet and deciding what can be run on EV and what can be run on traditional ICE, or what needs to be, and get a balance there. And clearly, within the passenger car sector over the last couple of years, this whole EV quality of battery and amount of charge retained is starting to become more and more important. But it's still, from my perspective, it's still quite in its infancy. There's not a lot that's being sort of surfaced from a dealer website point of view in terms of that level of capacity that's still in those batteries. Is that something you're seeing?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, you're touching on the operational fleet question as well there, where there's like just another level of information that you need to think through, right? When it's like charging, for example, is going to massively impact like your day-to-day operations of your business. And it's a big consideration for consumers as well, right? It's like, what's the capacity of this battery? How far is this vehicle going to go? And how am I going to charge it? And I'm buying this asset, which for most people, right, in the future, beyond a property, their car's battery will probably be the most valuable thing they own.
Yeah.
And so you want to know like how it works, whether it's any good, and how to look after it, right? So yeah, super important. Absolutely, there's a lot of websites out there where like you still see engine capacity or something like valuable real estate when on the screen, when like there's a huge like just amount of education that needs to be. Most people don't know the difference between kilowatts and kilowatt hours, right? Or energy and power.
Yeah.
That like again, there's a huge amount to learn to get up, just with this new lingo. And a lot of people just want to drive their car from A to B. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think still a massive education piece to be done for consumers, and when you look at that piece, there is a certain reticence still today from consumers because they don't understand what those acronyms or mnemonics mean, do they? And they don't understand. And essentially, I suppose from a consumer point of view, it's just like understanding how many miles to the gallon am I going to get? How economic is this vehicle? All I want to know is that if that battery originally started life with 300 miles range and now it's got 78%, I know where I sit. And if I only do journeys of 150 miles, I'm quite happy at that point. But that's, again, it's not being surfaced. And I suppose that's exactly what generational is starting to bring to the table, really.
Yeah, exactly. And I think then there's the, you do, generally speaking, batteries are better than most consumers expect. So in the vast majority of cases, you're creating reassurance and on average, I think probably about 2% a year degradation is what you might see. There is a degree of variation around that, like quite a big degree of variation based on how the car's been used. But you do see, like it was probably about 8 weeks ago, one of our customers took on a vehicle that had done 100,000 miles and was probably 9 years old. And I think the battery had about 44% capacity left. Now, that is very much an anomaly.
Yeah.
But like, if that happens to you, that vehicle, is pretty hard to sell, right?
Yeah.
Because it has they just took it on a part, didn't actually, it slipped through the net, right? Like for whatever reason, it didn't get tested at the time. Life happens, right?
Yeah.
But that then means that that vehicle only does about 35 miles of range. There is a use case for that vehicle, but it has a smaller net of buyers, right? And so that's kind of essentially helping businesses like support that market through transparency, right? Transparency, I think, is just a fundamental thing that's needed for any market to operate efficiently.
And I think your point there on a part exchange, we've got to be looking at how we determine the value of that part exchange from a dealer perspective. And clearly, if that is a 44% capacity battery, then we need to be offering less for that part exchange because that net will be smaller in terms of the audience for that vehicle. So we need to make sure that we've got a good buy price on that vehicle and be able to sell it at a rate or a level of retail value that is below normal value for that vehicle because of the capacity issue. So I suppose in terms of the sort of the way you present the product and how you deliver that information to a dealer and what the dealer needs to do, tell us a bit around that.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we pride ourselves on trying to make the solution super simple. So anyone can do it. It is you have an app on your phone, and then you have a little OBD unit that plugs into the diagnostic port of the car. And then you choose the make and model of the car, run the test, takes about 30 seconds to a minute. And then we generate a certificate that has on it all the key information you as a dealer or a potential customer needs to know in order to make a decision on that vehicle. So the OEM state of health of the battery, whether it's in warranty or not, and how much warranty is left, because the battery is warranted separately, and different vehicles have different warranty periods. And then the real range for that unique car, given its battery health, right, under different scenarios. So if you drive this car on the motorway in the summer, in the winter, in a city, etc., what will you really get? Not WLTP, but what will you get in the UK? And so, we produce that certificate, and that's something that dealers can use to put on their website, when you're marketing a vehicle in the image carousel. So really you're kind of selling with transparency, and I think that helps generate trust with people.
Great. Okay. And then let's talk about moving forward for generational. Where do you see significant sort of product development, or how are you going to increase your reach out into the marketplace? And clearly you're doing some work. Clearly you're connected to the OEMs to get that data down. And are you connected to all OEMs, or where are you at the moment, and where are you looking to get to in the next few months?
Yeah, so we've got a few big partnerships that I'm super excited about, but sadly I can't talk about today. But I think a really interesting topic is the role that battery health will start playing in determining the value of vehicles, as you touched on, right? And I think like this is likely to become much more formalized in the next 6 to 12 months. So I think, watch this space. It is coming. I think, if you look at the an ICE car, the engine and the powertrain account for about a third of the total bill of materials, right? For the vehicle. And, in an EV, the motor and the power electronics cost about the same as the engine, maybe a little bit less. But the battery costs 3 to 5 times as much as that, right? So it can be 40-50% of the value of the vehicle. So it's super important part of the vehicle's value, and I think that will really play out in the used market. And I think we'll be a key player in helping to facilitate that. So yeah, that's a big one to watch, I think, for me. And then I think another thing I'm really keen to sort of push forward in future is seeing improvements in how EVs are marketed. So we mentioned some of the stuff around vehicle websites. A lot of vehicles, EVs are marketed in a very similar way to ICE cars, whereas actually they just have different features, different things you need to give prominence to, right? And particularly as we're moving from early adopters into the sort of early majority of people who aren't the kind of quote unquote dark green buyer profile, right? They're a more normal consumer. I think a lot of that stuff's becoming super important. As you use the word, like, how wide is your net? You want to make sure you're bringing in as many potential people to look at those vehicles as possible. So what that means for us is things like integration with website providers, making sure all that data flows down from the point at which it's tested all the way through to the marketing of the vehicle and all those touch points to the customer.
So are you, and again, don't mention names clearly, but there's clearly a sort of responsibility here on the classified sites and the aggregator sites to take this information in, because we're pre-EV, we would feed our cars to one of the aggregator platforms. It would do a VRM lookup and pull all of that data down. Now, at the moment, I'm not really seeing anything on those aggregator sites around that battery capacity piece. Is that something you're engaged with at the moment or working with?
Yeah, so the conversations are starting to happen, which I'm super excited about, because I think when, as a consumer, if you can more easily browse, buy the information that you want and get it super quickly in the right format, I think it will help. It must help convert. And we know, so one of our customers, Carbase, since they've started putting our certificates on their EV ads, they've had a 300% increase in views on their EV ads. So there's this latent kind of demand for it. And it's something we're actively trying to help improve with working with those businesses.
Yeah, and look, that's a good example, isn't it? That once you start to put that information out there in a format, you mentioned people don't know the difference between kilowatt and kilowatt hours, and when you look at some of the information that comes down on an EV vehicle, it's just mind blowing. But the one thing that doesn't come down most of the time is the range that vehicle, that individual vehicle, is going to actually be able to provide you with. And I think the news this morning. There was the news this morning about how many of these charging stations are being hit and having their cables cut off, and for the minimal amount of copper that's in there and this is starting to become a bit of an epidemic, particularly in the West Midlands for some reason. But that sort of news story, unfortunately, starts to put doubt in consumers' minds again, doesn't it? We've been through that whole EV piece and the rise and then the fall and the market taking a hit 18 months ago, taking a hit towards the end of last year. And we need to be more open and transparent around, as an industry, around that battery capacity piece, because these negative stories are sort of rising every now and again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things we're trying to do more of is publish educational pieces and share some of the data we have, because it tells a really positive story generally, right? Which is that batteries are better than people expect. They last longer. Generally, you've got a lot of warranty cover from the manufacturer, and it's not something you obviously want to look after it, particularly if you're buying the car on the used market and it's going to be yours. But yeah, it's something that is a huge barrier to adoption for a lot of people. I think Cox Automotive released some data at Car Dealer Live a couple of weeks ago and said that 70% of consumers want more information on battery health and warranties. So yeah, it's massively important. And we're seeing now more demand for industry from industry for this information. So just want to try and service that need, really, make it aware that we're already here.
So in terms of dealers engaging with Generational, is it a simple process to onboard? Is it typically, as you showed me just a minute ago, the plug into the OBD? Is it OBDC?
OBD.
OBD into that socket, and then that generates what is needed and comes up on the app, and then you can generate from the app the certificate.
Yeah, exactly. Super simple to get started. Like, you'd be up and running within a couple of days, basically. So there's no complex training or complex onboarding. Download the app, and then you need your OBD reader, and then you're good to go. So super straightforward. We've tried and made it so anyone can do it, because it's not just like tests no longer, I think, and diagnostics, because the battery is so important, are not just going to take place in a workshop context, right? With like big bulky bits of material. It needs to be potentially when you're taking a car in, or like going out to see a vehicle if it's being serviced. So just having something small, quick, and pocket sized to be able to expose that information, I think is super important.
I suppose final question from me is, how is this sort of starting to filter through to the sourcing channels as well? Because clearly we've got, the traditional auction route. We've got a lot of this peer-to-peer buying, or through the likes of the car buying services now. And ultimately, it's got to go all the way back to the top of the funnel, hasn't it? It's got to go back to the source of the vehicle. So if the dealer is going to be transparent on the website to the consumer, then surely these supply channels have got to be transparent to the dealers. So are you doing work in that space as well?
Yeah, so I think it's happening. It's happening now. Again, like, watch this space in the next 3 months. I think it's natural, though, that it's happening this way, right? Because I think that the demand started from consumers. I think it's filtering up earlier in the supply chain. So, we already see dealers, if they've got, let's say they've got 5 Renault Zoes and one's got a better battery health than the other, putting a couple of £100 more on that car if you can, right? If your business allows it. And I think that will naturally then filter up through to their sourcing methods. But those are bigger businesses. Things take longer to implement processes. There's more stakeholders there, right? So it's happening. Watch this space. Yeah,
and I think you're right. It is going to be driven by dealers, and eventually dealers will start to pressure those channels, because clearly it's a vital part of that EV mix for the dealer and for the consumer.
Yeah.
So look, these fly past these podcasts, Oliver. So we've done our 20 minutes and a bit. We're nearing the end. So in conclusion, generational solutions allow dealers to conduct battery health checks, certify the battery state for EVs they have in stock, and that alleviates one of the buyer's biggest concerns, which in turn is going to help increase stock turn on those EVs and maximise margins. So Oliver, I've really enjoyed our chat today, and thank you for taking the time to take us through the services that Generational offers. Before I let you go, however, we need to clear up the icebreaker question for our viewers. So which of the 3 interesting facts was in fact false?
So it's the last one about being a Bitcoin trader. That is completely false. It's partially true in a slightly tragic way. So I did get involved in Bitcoin in 2014. I bought a few back when it was worth nothing. But I experienced what a lot of crypto pioneers did: is your hard drive on your laptop crashes, gets wiped, and they're vanished into the ether. So after that, I've learned my lesson of, like, I think Warren Buffett said, don't invest in anything you don't understand. So I don't touch the stuff, and I stay well away from it from now on.
You weren't that guy who swapped 30 Bitcoins for a pizza or something like that and then generated £3 billion, but whatever.
No,
that ridiculous.
But it would have been life-changing. Yeah.
Oh, no. Well, thank you for that, and thanks for sharing that with us. So, Oliver, thanks for your time today. For more information about Generational, visit the website www.generational.ac, or message Oliver on LinkedIn. Thank you for watching, and a quick reminder that here at Motorvait we offer 1 hour remote one-to-one dealer discovery sessions for free. To learn more about these sessions and why you should book one, visit our website www.motorvait.co.uk. Goodbye for now.